Welcome to No More Mondays, the podcast that helps you navigate career challenges through the wisdom of professionals who have been at the same crossroads. I'm your host, Angie Callen, and I welcome you to join me each week as I chat with leaders, entrepreneurs, and employees who are here to share their practical, tactical advice and some inspiration on how they arrived at career and life satisfaction. From job searching and career changes to going out on your own, we are breaking down barriers and providing actionable takeaways to help you take charge of your Mondays and ditch those Sunday blues. Welcome to No More Mondays. Hello, and welcome to No More Mondays. I'm your host, Angie Callen. Do you find yourself wondering what's next for you in your life and career? Maybe you're at that midpoint of your career thinking about whether to keep doing what you've been doing for the last 20 years or spend the next 15 or 20 years doing something more interesting, more satisfying, more fun, more meaningful. Yep, I've talked to a lot of people who are at that point in their life and their career and about navigating that crossroads. And that is exactly why I am excited to welcome Deborah Johnson to the show today. Deborah is an author, speaker, and music producer. You guys, she's been nominated for a Grammy. How cool is that? She's written hundreds of songs, musicals, and produces a hit podcast called Women in Halftime. And she and I are going to leverage that knowledge and learn on how you can navigate this crossroads. She's figured out how to be successful in a competitive industry and has used that experience to help people move through the challenges of halftime to maximize skills, talents, and resources that make their second half better than the first. Let's find out her special sauce. Help me welcome to the show, Deborah Johnson. Deborah, welcome to No More Mondays.
That sounds good.
Awesome. So before we dig into halftime and kind of how to get through it, because that's really what I want to focus on and give some people advice around, I would love to hear a little bit more about your professional background in music and producing and kind of your foundation in the career world.
Well, I have a huge background in music, of course, and as an entrepreneur. So I've been an entrepreneur, lifetime entrepreneur, though I have taught every single level from, very young all the way through graduate school. And I've taught in the university system, but my love has been creating. So as an entrepreneur, and there are just things that you learn, first of all, that it takes a lot of work all the time and love what I do. And I'm a self-starter and just know the value of, trying and trying again. And when something doesn't work, you keep going and try it a little bit different way. So, but that's been, I've done a lot of projects, have done a lot of entertaining, really all around the world, and love what I do. I don't want to quit until I'm in my 80s. So that's why I can talk about those that are at the halftime of life or mid-career. So I feel like, we all have with medical advances, none of us know how long we have, but there's a lot we can do still.
Yeah, and statistically speaking, we have longer now than we really ever have. And this is a really interesting and applicable topic to a lot of my client base. I work with a lot of kind of mid-seasoned professionals or moving through executives. And I have this conversation a lot where people come to me 15, 20 years in their career and they are evaluating that idea of, am I going to do the same thing I've done for 20 years? Or am I going to do something different? And I'm curious, I want to dig into your advice around that stuff, but I'm also curious where and if you experience that yourself, because I often find in these types of these types of entrepreneurial endeavors, it comes out of like our experience. So tell me how you have navigated that kind of like halftime piece.
That's a great question, Angie, and it's what I'm asked often. And when I speak with people in groups, I had kind of an awakening. It was about the 2008, 7-8 when things started dropping out for many, and especially in the performance field, entertaining field. And I was doing some headline entertaining, and we had some great shows going on. But all of a sudden, my calendar was kind of empty. And I'm wondering, okay, now what's next at my point of life? And started evaluating what is working right now. I know this market. I've done a lot of projects. I've got plenty of credits. What am I going to do? And I decided to go ahead and expand my business because I saw that there were some music groups now not getting booked at the levels and what we were doing, but there were a lot of speakers. And I thought, oh, I wonder what that's all about. I had no idea it was even a business. So I started expanding my career. And I really encourage people to do this. Look and see what your skills are, what your experience is. Do not discount those. So a lot of people say, oh, I want to do something totally different, especially now. You are right, Angie, because these shutdowns, it made everybody think twice, 3 times, 4 times going, do I really want to do this?
I remember April and May of 2020, I just had this like hordes of people were calling, and it wasn't because of layoffs. It was because, okay, the world's going to end and I better do something better with my life before it does. And so those like, I would say, environmental changes do make us kind of stop and evaluate. And I would say we're probably in another one of those phases right now. So this is a very timely conversation.
Yes, we are definitely in that time frame right now. Anytime I tell people what I speak about or what I've written about, because I just wrote another book, and I was like, oh yeah, that is so relevant. Oh, I need to read that. Oh, I need that message, and to be able to move on, because people are really questioning. And I think that's it's an important time to take a step back and see really where you are. That's where I usually have people start.
Well, and this perfect segue, because I'm curious as we get into that practical, how do you apply this to yourself, everybody out there? How do you even know you're at the point of needing to take a step back? We've called this midlife crisis in the past. I like the idea of halftime way better.
Yes, I do too.
But I say, what are like the signs that it's time to kind of take stock and evaluate?
Well, there's a lot of mental things that go on. You could be restless. That doesn't always mean you need to make a change. It might mean that you need to shift something in your priorities. So, you want to take a strong look at that. Now, I've seen people just totally quit what they do and go to something else, and then they're out of business in a year. They don't plan ahead. So I think it's very important to take enough time to think, to journal, to see where you're at. And one of the big things I advise people to do first is to really look at your core values, because that's going to influence your purpose and where you go next. It's really interesting how, our lives can take all of these different roads and turns, and we could do a number of different things, but to stop and evaluate, what are your core values? What's your experience? What do you absolutely love to do? Now, if I love to teach yoga. That does not mean you need to stop everything and live in your car for 5 years to try to get a yoga business. No, it's very important to take enough time. People don't stop and think. Right now, they're just fed stuff. We're just following the leader almost. So to be able to do that and then get wise perspective. That's a big answer for all of that, I know. But
and we're going to dig into all that big answer, because I love the core values piece as a place to start, because there's this idea of, how do I even know I need to take stock? If you feel restless or just something isn't right, lean into that. And in that part, that idea of giving yourself space, I think, is so important. I was talking about this on a recent podcast with this guy named Matt, who up and moved to Mexico from Canada on a 3-week whim. And he said to me, he goes, I slowed down and I allowed myself to think in the shower and give yourself brain space, because we are so overstimulated now that sometimes you just keep going through those motions, like you said, the structure that society gives us, without stopping and saying, is this what I want? So I would say kind of a first step is to challenge that norm and that thinking, because we're also in a time and place when you're allowed to more than you've ever been able to.
Right. Yeah, you really are. There's a lot of grace right now. and people are shifting around. There's a lot of jobs that are available if you're willing to work. There's just a lot of people are experiencing change. But core values, it's a chapter I wrote in this last book. In the appendix, I felt like, could be one of the most important chapters of the whole book, and of just dealing with those values, because we don't stop. It's not only that we haven't evaluated them before, we haven't reevaluated them, and to see exactly where we are now. I mean, there's wake-up calls that happen. These times, I had two contacts yesterday, two big wake-up calls of contacts that were close contacts, and they're experiencing health changes. I mean, those are the type of things that say, I think I need to not put off this memoir I've been wanting to write for 10 years, or starting this business. I could start it as a side business. That's what I always suggest too. Side business is a great way to, test the waters a little bit.
Yep.
But, there's a lot of things, but look at where you stand first with your values, and it'll help drive your purpose.
That is a very big recurring theme here on No More Mondays, as we talk to people who have figured out how to use their strengths, their skills, their experience in a way that brings them satisfaction in their career. And it almost always comes back to having some sort of purpose, and that, or the why, or your personal mission. And if you feel overwhelmed by figuring that out, we've talked about it on here before. I literally talked about this yesterday on a personal branding webinar. Like that idea of core values can be so grounding. And just from a practical perspective, if you don't even know how to start with that, one, it sounds like we're going to get into Deborah's book a little bit more in a few. That's a good place. But you can pull up lists of like 100 or 200 core values and start striking the ones that don't fit. And then you just keep whittling it down to the, 4 to 6 or so that do. And you'll be surprised how much of a foundation that gives for you to kind of back check decisions and opportunities too.
Yeah, that's a great points there. 100 to 200, it could be overwhelming, except for when you look at the list, it's like, oh, yeah, what's really the most important?
Yeah, you don't have to pull them out of thin air. I also really love the word grace, especially for you working with women in that kind of midlife space. A lot of them are going through change, kids leaving the house, you're empty nester. Sometimes, unfortunately, divorce is big at that mid-age, right, or the career piece starts to rear its ugly head. And we are so hard on ourselves. So yes. I would say, from an advice perspective, how do we give ourselves more grace?
Well, that's a real mindset to be kind to yourself. There's this big thing of the imposter syndrome and not good enough, and this shaming sort of thing that happens. And at mid-career, there are a lot of men that go through those same changes. So, even though my podcast is Women at Halftime, it's not just for women. It's there are men that listen, and I have men guests, and a lot of them are going through the same thing, that they don't always admit it. So I've been married for a number of years. They don't always admit it. And I've had sons. So so I know I can come from a little bit of experience here. But yeah, in pursuing, where you are, it's one of the highest times of life, of course, with relationship changes too, with divorce. It's huge, because when you're raising kids, a lot of times you stay together, and for those kids, and you're working together, then all of a sudden those kids are grown and you're going, who are you? I don't know who I'm married to. And that's when that happens a lot of times, to take that step back there. And I will say from experience, that takes some work, because your relationships become more and more important the older we get. And there's many studies about that, and mentally how important that is, and socially. And but yeah, it's finding that purpose at this point in life, at that mid-career. And in the core values, I kind of approached it a little bit different, because this will help with purpose. I divided it in 2 categories. One is faith. What are you putting your trust in? And number 2 is character. And there's a lot of things under character. Number 1 is respect down at the bottom. And this is where our relationships come in. respect, trust, dependability, thoroughness, initiative, and creativity. There's all of these parts to our core values that really help walk us through what are the words that you would put alongside these that are really valuable to you, and how does your business reflect that? How does your life reflect that?
And how do your relationships reflect that?
Yes.
Or your job if you're not in business? It really is, it becomes a little bit of a mirror. And it's interesting that I also think as you go through those almost categorical explorations of your core values, then looking at like how you're distributing your time and energy into them. So
Right.
I'll give you like an actual example that I think you're going to find interesting, Deborah. When I was a brand newbie coach 5 years ago, I have a client who at that time was in her mid 40s, so she was prime halftime. And she, funny enough, has gone through a formal halftime program since then. And she and I still work together on and off. But one of the things that we realized is that she was trying to fill all of her buckets. She was trying to align all of her core values with what she did for work. And it was putting so much pressure on the professional aspect of the life that you're setting yourself up for failure, because there is no perfect scenario there. So I'm curious from an execution standpoint, how do you like figure out that distribution and get yourself involved in different things that are going to then end up filling all the buckets?
Well, no one thing can fill all the buckets. As you said, it's not going to be your work. It's not going to be your personal life. But what you can do is evaluate. I was always told, you can do this pros and cons list here. Just make it simple. Make it very, very simple. And you've got these parts of your values now that you're evaluating. Maybe what are your top 3? What are your top 5 top values in your life? And then figure out, okay, so does this align? Yes. How many things of what I'm doing now align at least with this? I don't have to be 100% in this area, but does it align with this? There are a lot of people that are very happy doing what they're doing. They've got a box. They're not entrepreneurs. And they're thinking, oh, is something wrong? Well, you can kind of expand in that box. It's okay. I give you permission to do that.
Yes, I love the idea of giving permission to people out there, because, especially for people in halftime, a lot of us grew up with baby boomer parents, and the times of and the mentality around exploring and finding the right box is totally different now. So keep going.
Yes. Well, and I've seen this because all our kids are so different, and one may need a box, the other doesn't. So, but that box gives you some of that guideline. You're working with somebody, you're working for someone. You don't have that in responsibility, but you can expand within that. There are things that you can do that will really satisfy that need of doing something more. Look at your values and what your time is like. Your time is one of your most precious resources. Don't use it all up, doing, something that's just going to make you spin round and round. My book is called, the newest one is called Stop Circling. You don't want to keep spinning and circling around and round and round. And this is not all about the book, but it was just so relevant with this illustration when I started speaking about this, because you end up going round and round and round and thinking, what's wrong? I'm still not out of this. I'm still feeling the same way. And
you're on the hamster wheel.
Yeah. So and again, when you pinpoint, where you are, where you want to be, and you really have, you get the perspective. That's part of what you need as well, wise perspective. And make some of those decisions that at least you have what it takes to exit. Now, we're going to have multiple roundabouts in our lives, because there's going to be projects that are roundabouts. I've also experienced that. There have been a lot of different times of, thinking, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm never going to finish this. But there are those principles that apply to most everything that are just very, very basic.
And I think sometimes we're meant to be, I love that term of the roundabout. I think sometimes we're meant to be on the roundabout, but we don't know why we're on a roundabout until we finally get out of it. And then you're like, oh, it's because I needed to be able to like merge into that exit or, whatever it is.
Right.
When I talk with people who are in a career situation, or sometimes it is even like an entrepreneurial kind of challenge, and they're just like, something isn't right. So they're aware, they know they need to lean into the fact that something isn't right, but they don't know where to start. A lot of times I challenge them to identify what's missing, because then sometimes that can flag like a core value or a part of your purpose that isn't being fueled. And then that becomes a practical starting point to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to know that until you, you step back, and it's almost like a nutritional guide. Okay, so what is my body needing? Does it need, I'll usually say my body needs more dark chocolate, but that's not always the case. So, or more coffee. But I think that's a great point there, to really stand back and say, well, maybe I need more education here. Maybe I need some more, a bigger, like a wider tool set right now with AI and with all of the things going on, and with just chat GPT and all of this stuff. I do a lot of writing. But what am I missing to be able to access some of these tools? And if, you're starting a side business, maybe you're going to start writing a blog, equip yourself enough. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn from those mistakes, believe me. And I have a lot of them. But that's how you learn. When you've asked some of my background, I mean, my goodness, there's a lot that I've done, a lot that I've learned from that process, but I would have never learned it if I hadn't done it.
And that's where I think just sometimes you can just try,
yes.
Right? There's that, we are so, the fear of failure in America and society, I think, is real. And I think it's what keeps people in that circle.
Right. It really does. You can't, there's a lot of books on that, again, Fail Fast and all of those. And, I've read a lot of those, but the principle is the same, is very similar in its scope. Is you got to start, and you got to just do it. It doesn't matter what time of life you're at either. It doesn't matter. Evaluate strongly, though. Market, look at everything where it is right now. What can you do to boost that? And a lot of times we need to do that with life. We just want to keep going and just jump. No, evaluate first and then jump, intelligently, at least.
Yeah. It's not like making reckless decisions,
no.
But also at the same time, and while they might sound counterintuitive, embracing that idea that kind of done is better than perfect, or starting is better than starting perfectly. You just do that with some sort of, education and, like you said, wise counsel under your belt, so that it isn't just, jumping off the precipice without a parachute. One of the things and this is kind of like, I think the next phase of this whole conversation is this. I love this piece of kind of your brand and what you speak about, and about all of us having a hero inside. And I want you to kind of tell everybody more about that and how we embrace it.
Yeah, that's really all about that you have everything it takes. And you have to believe that, and you just have to do some digging and spend some time, where you're going to go, what's next. And that's really why I put out the material. That's why I work so hard at this point in my life. And I still want to work hard, because I want people there's a lot of people sitting on their skills, their experience, their contacts. And it was interesting. I walked in, my husband and I have coffee most every morning. I get up very early. I get up earlier than he does. I work out. I do a lot of things before. And then we have I have my cappuccino. I'm very spoiled. I walked in and I said, there are so many people just sitting on their skills. And I said all that. They're sitting on their experiences. They're sitting on their resources, my goodness. At this point in their life, they're not doing anything. And he said, that's what I want to hear from you. And that message is just so very strong. It's what our world needs to hear right now.
the idea that you saw, well, your husband pointed out what got you fired up.
Right.
And that's what you started really using. And it's funny, what used to get me fired up, and sometimes you don't realize it until you're doing it, which I also think is kind of similar to what was happening with you. I used to get fired up and I didn't realize it until I left the corporate world and moved to Colorado, which was my big leap of faith. And started living mountain life and getting to ski on weekdays and do all the things that people do 1 week a year. Right.
Yeah.
And I started looking back and I'm like, we are so mediocre and we're so okay with it. And I actually, not to dog on social media, but to go back to that idea is that it's always constantly present. And I think that versus a magazine, one-time experience, right? I go to the newsstand, I intentionally get it, versus social media, which is glued to our hand constantly, that it becomes really easy to get the comparison syndrome going, which then I think makes us feel self-conscious about what those unique skills and gifts and knowledge are that give us our hero. And we don't lean into it because we fear who we really are, because we then compare. So it's like this little vicious cycle. It's another roundabout, Deborah.
Yes, it is. And I mean, this is true in every single field. And I've been in professional music field for a very long time. And I used to line up showcases with, across the country. And I was booked then from those. And I tell you, you hear so many artists in these showcases. And the moment you start hearing them, you're going, oh, I could sing better than that. Oh, I could do better than that. Oh, I can play circles around that person. I just talked to somebody last week that had called me, and we set up an appointment. And he was saying, I know I'm such a much better guitar player than all these people. And I'm thinking, there's a million guitar players. The people that work know how to do the business, period. And they've really established a lot of what, they are doing uniquely. You've got to find what you're unique at doing, something, and then you can do it. But find some of those areas that you can actually do the business in. But yeah, there's this constant comparison, you are so right.
So I want to come full circle, because that idea that you've got to lean into what's important to you and what you're really good at comes back to that kind of core value piece. Right. And so I want you to give everybody one really big, giant pearl of wisdom on what they do to lean into that. What is your best piece of advice on how people have a better second half than first?
That's a huge question.
It's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question of how to have a better second half than first. Well, you have to be willing to do the work. I think that's, there's no one thing that's going to work for every single person, but a commitment to doing the work can get you there. That's what I would say, because if you put it off, it's procrastination. Putting it off. If you need a coach, get a good coach like you, Angie. But, you get someone that can help you, that would understand who you are. It's this commitment and lean in to doing the work it takes to get where you want and need to be at this point in life.
Well, and it goes back to, I love that title of your book, that stuck isn't a 4-letter word. Yeah. Stuck is a 4-letter word if you allow it and choose it to be. Right. But to me, it comes back to that old adage of why put off to tomorrow what you could do today. It's just a matter of starting. It's just like a new food program or an exercise routine or anything. Starting typically is the hardest part. And if you need help to do that, call me. No, kidding.
Yes,
kind
of course.
Or call Deborah. But find a way to just push yourself, towards something, just as kind of an exploration, because Deborah and I are giving you permission to explore and find the hero inside.
Right. Yes, you have it, and you have everything within you. You really do. But you got to do the work. You can't put that off. You've got to understand that you were uniquely made and you have everything it takes.
You do. And And I love the idea of you have everything that it takes, and you both have permission, but also have to do the work to figure out what that is, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And what do we always say? The journey is the destination. Figuring out what you have inside and who that hero is and how you are supposed to give that gift to the world is part of why we're all on this planet.
That's right. I love that. Amen and amen.
I love it. All right. So as we kind of wind things down, I swear this was a 5-minute conversation, Deborah. I'm like, I want to talk some more. But as we kind of wind things down, give everybody a quick tip on how they find you, how they find your books, book you for speaking, or otherwise get in on all the work you're doing to help people have a better halftime.
Well, thank you so much for asking that. I always appreciate that. I love doing these interviews. They're just so much fun. I get to meet all sorts of people.
I know.
You can always find me and my books I have a number of websites. There's 3 main ones that people go to. Goalsforyourlife.com. It's all together, goalsforyourlife.com. And get on my newsletter, /newsletter. So you can get that, goalsforyourlife.com /newsletter. Deborah Johnson speaker. And I just put up my new, I always put up new stuff on there with what you can download and figure out more about me in my bio. So that's Deborah Johnson speaker. Everybody loves the music. I've had the DJ Works music going on forever. That's been my first website. It's the reason why I wrote the book Bad Code, because it was hacked. But I've had it going for a very long time. Even
gotta love using life experiences to your advantage.
Yes, a lot of experience. Yeah, and you can find all my books on Amazon. They're in all versions as well, including Audible and all of the print versions, ebook. I would love you to, if you also, my podcast, Women at Halftime, not just for women, but you're welcome to listen. Love that. And I always love reviews, and you can contact me at any time.
And we will link all of that to the show notes at nomoremondays.info, because we also love reviews, everybody. And Deborah, this has been such a great conversation. I have a feeling we're going to have Deborah Johnson 2.0, because we just have more to talk about. Oh. But in the meantime, I hope all of you out there will tune into what she's got to offer, because we have a lot of shared perspectives. And I think it's amazing to really have resources to explore what you're supposed to be doing in this world. And Deborah, I am so grateful that you were willing to be here, share your story, share your wisdom with everybody, because it's a great inspiration to those who feel like they're on a circle or on a roundabout and want to make a turn. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. You're absolutely delightful, Angie.
Oh, thank you. This has been so much fun. You're 100% right. This is what's so fun about podcasting is the network and the people that you get to talk to and all the wonderful things they're doing. So thank you so much, not only for being here, but for being an inspiration and a great resource for everybody out there as we work to have more value-aligned, satisfying lives.
Well, thanks again for having me, and I'll look forward to next time.
Yeah, this has been amazing, Deborah. Thank you for being part of our show and joining the No More Mondays movement. We always love hearing from people who have successfully navigated their own career crossroads to chart a path to success and are helping others do the same. There's some amazing advice here, everybody, so I hope all of you out there took some notes and will learn from all of Deborah's wisdom. Also, for all of you out there listening, I would love for you to subscribe to No More Mondays wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating, because it's a huge help to podcasters like Deborah and I. If you want to drop us comments, guest suggestions, or feedback, visit us online at nomoremondays.info, where you'll also find the show notes from today's episodes. And we'll see you next week for another edition of No More Mondays podcast. Thanks for joining us for another episode of No More Mondays. Tune in next week as we bring you more insights and actions to help you improve your life and career. Don't forget, visit us online at nomoremondays.info to get all the details, show notes, and recommendation from this episode. No More Mondays. We drop new episodes every Wednesday. No More Mondays is brought to you by Career Benders, Inc. in partnership with executive producer Jane Durkee. For more information about career coaching, resume writing, personal branding, recruiting, and entrepreneurship coaching services, visit us online at careerbenders.com.